Bridging Gaps, the business podcast with Deborah Levitt, sharing the challenges and stories of fellow business owners. Hi, my name is Deborah Levitt, and I'm here today with Anne Renshaw for the first episode in my new podcast, Bridging Gaps, the business podcast. So, Anne, hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Great to be here.
Oh, I'm really pleased to have you on. I'm really looking forward to talking to you some more. So Anne is from a company called Flamme Rouge, and perhaps you can explain just a little bit about why the company is called Flamme Rouge and what it is that you do.
Yes, so I do strategic marketing and business development for professional services companies. I've got a history of doing it and set up on my own doing it last year, just to be able to go out and help some smaller firms like smaller accountants and solicitors and architects be able to compete with some of the bigger firms out there, smaller firms that might not be able to have their own in-house capability because they haven't actually got the funds to be able to support somebody full time. And how it was called Flamme Rouge, when I decided to set the business up, I had no idea what to call it, despite being in marketing, and was brainstorming with my friend Tom, and he just said, write all the things down that are in your head at this moment. And I wrote lots of things down, and it was during the Tour de France, and I'd written the words Flamme Rouge down, and Tom said, right, I really like that. What does it mean? Flamme Rouge, when you're on a stage of something like the Tour de France, a kilometre from the end, there's a big kind of arc that goes over the race, and it signals the last kilometre of the race. So it signals the fact that you've nearly got to the finish. It's time to give it one last push. It kind of signifies the end of where all the teamwork finishes, and then people just kind of make a dash to the finish. So for me, it was really appropriate because a lot of what I do is based around teamwork. It's about helping people within the businesses be the best of themselves through teamwork and achieving things through marketing and business development, and effectively helping them achieve their Flamme Rouge, whatever that might be.
Excellent. And how do you help them? What sort of things do you do to actually help them to take those steps and actually put their marketing, strategy in place?
It varies. I've done so many different projects with different firms. So from going into a firm that has quite a good idea about where their marketing is going, but they're not quite sure why they're not bringing leads in, and I can kind of do a bit of a review on what their business development processes are, whether their team need a bit of upskilling in terms of networking training or business development sales training, look at their pitch documents, presentations, and give them advice on that. But then there's also firms that I've worked with that they know that they're growing. They're not quite sure why they're growing. They want to achieve more growth in the coming years. And so they need a bit of help on establishing who their kind of key audiences are, really what their USP is and what they're going to take out to these audiences, what service lines are the most profitable, what kind of client base is the most profitable, so that they can then move forward with a kind of a really good idea how to communicate to that market and what the best way of marketing is. And for a lot of professional services firms, they don't have huge budgets to be able to spend on marketing, so it's working out what they can do that doesn't take a lot of investment, such as key referrer networks, where they can just kind of work out relationships, move them forward, and it doesn't take a lot of resource in terms of money. It's just more their time and effort in focusing on building those and moving them forward.
Okay, thank you. So what sort of, so what is a key referrer network? What sort of things is that, so for somebody who's maybe starting out in business and is looking for some marketing, is looking at how to get out there, what sorts of things should they be looking at? And is a key referrer something they should know what that is and have, or should they be taking different approaches?
I think to a certain extent, referrers can work for any business. It's particularly important in professional services because a lot of work comes from referrers, and it's a really good channel to be able to convert them quite quickly because they're already warm and to have a higher conversion rate. I would say that a lot of people tend to have a lot of referrers in their network. So say a firm of solicitors may have lots of accountants that they give work to. They may have lots of banks that they give work to. They might have lots of wealth managers or independent financial advisors. And a lot of people can think, well, I'm giving out all of these referrals. So they may have 15 accountants that they give one job to each time, and then they don't understand why they don't get a lot of referrals back. And it's probably because they're giving one referral to each of these people, and there may be other firms of solicitors that are giving more than that to them. So they then don't reciprocate because they're not high up on the kind of chart or the agenda of these firms. So what I always suggest to people is that they go through a bit of a process of looking at the people they do have referral relationships with, working out where the real opportunities lie, where there are people with a really great client bank, or where there are people that they really get on with, and then actually kind of bringing this down to 3 or 4 key relationships that if they give them 5 referrals instead of the 1, they're more likely to get them back because they've given a decent amount. And also part of having referrer relationships is really getting to know these people, having lines of communication so that it's as easy as possible for them to refer to you, and indeed for you to refer to them, so that they then reciprocate. And you can't do it with lots of referrers. It's much easier just to have a small number of referrers that you can really get to know well, that then the referrals will start flowing forward.
So it's really about building a strong relationship with a select group of people that you think it's going to be mutually beneficial.
Absolutely. And it doesn't necessarily need to be professionals. There are people in kind of construction that I know where, and in fact, in many, many different businesses, where if there's somebody that's in your network that you know is a really good ambassador for you, and is the kind of person that has people in their network that can refer people to you, it's just picking those kind of people out as well. So it's not necessarily just limited to professional services. It could be any industry.
Okay. And what about networking? Because I know when I started going networking, I found it really daunting, and I still find it quite off-putting to walk into a room of strangers on some occasions where, you know, everybody seems to already be happily chatting and things like that. What kind of things do you recommend to people, you know, if they are starting getting out and they you know, so I know from my experience and also from other people I've spoken to that quite often the feeling is, oh, I can't do that, or I wouldn't be any good at that, or I don't like it. And so what would you suggest that we do to overcome those sorts of things?
I think the key thing for me is to remember at all times that probably 90% of the people in that room are feeling exactly the same way as you do. A lot of people feel quite worried about networking. They're not easy networkers, particularly business owners that are very good at what they do, but they're not necessarily great at relationships and just walking into a room full of people. There's quite a lot of pressure on that. So yes, I would say, bear in mind that lots of people are in that position. Sometimes you can walk into that room feeling I'm the only person that feels this way, and you're absolutely not. I do a lot of networking, but I still get very nervous when I go into rooms. So I have what I call my little networking persona called Confident Anne. And I get to the door sometimes feeling very nervous, but I become Confident Anne. And I walk into the room and I put a big smile on my face. And for the first 5 minutes, I just kind of force myself to go in and talk to people, force myself to look like this confident person. And once you've got over the first 5 minutes, you'll become that person anyway. And you'll suddenly realise that it's really not that bad, and that everybody is really lovely, and that it'll be a great experience.
And do you have any tips or I don't know, kind of stock questions or conversation starters or anything that you would say, okay, if it all goes quiet, I know how I'm going to get this conversation moving?
In the first instance, to get over kind of having to go into big groups of people, I would say just my one tip is to go to a networking event early, because it's so much easier to get there when there's only a few people, kind of 2 or 3 people already there. Because then as people come in, you'll naturally be introduced to people, and it's so much easier than walking into a room full of people where there's already conversations in flow. And in terms of just asking questions, make sure that there's no kind of stock question, but make sure it's questions that you're actually interested in about that person. So if you start saying to them, well, what do you think of the state of the economy? And you're not really interested in the state of the economy, it's going to show. So actually, there's nothing wrong with saying to somebody, how's your year been so far in business? Or have you got any holidays planned? Lots of people want to speak about themselves, and to talk to people about themselves is the easiest thing you can do. And really, if you're the kind of person that finds it quite easy just to talk to people about not necessarily the nitty gritty of their business, but stuff to do with them as well, then actually that's quite a good place to start. Because you don't need to know what industry they're in. You don't need to know where they are in the position, in the company that they're in. Just showing an interest in them as a person is just as good a thing to do.
Excellent. So that leads quite nicely into talking about people. And how did you, so you've been, I think it's coming up for about 18 months now that you've been running Flamme Rouge?
Yes, indeed.
How did you find it when you first started? So you came from, I think, a corporate background. And you got into being, essentially self-employed, as many business owners, including myself, are. How did you find that transition and that move from big companies to being yourself?
Wow, there are so many different things that I've experienced. Firstly, owning your own business is just amazing in many, many ways. Every time you win a new client, it's you, and you're just so joyful that somebody has picked you and trusted you with their business and has trusted you to be able to help them take their business forward. And that's a fantastic aspect of it. And even now, when I win a new client, it's just a feeling like no other, really. I think what I hadn't fully thought about is the fact that I'm quite a people person. There are some days I go and work with clients on their premises, and that's amazing, and I love being part of their team. But there are other days that I'm working from home, and actually it can get quite lonely, and I miss those kind of water cooler moments where you can just have a chat with somebody about what you watched on telly last night, or what they're doing for their holiday, or anything like that, really. So I think the people side of things I miss the most. Just having a team around me. But then I've learned that I can still do that. I've got a group of friends that I used to go to a networking event with, who are really close friends now. And I know that at any point I could pick up the phone to any one of them, or just send them a message, and they'd be able to help. They'd be able to just chat inanely with me about something. And also I've just found a co-working space where I'm going to be based out of, kind of a day or day and a half a week. Which has made a big difference, and I've already made lots of friends there. So going there kind of feels like going to an office. So I would say that anybody that was thinking about starting up their own business, to build up a network of people around you that you can at least call or message is really important, because it can be quite lonely as a business owner.
Yeah, and I know that's something that I've come across quite a lot as well, not just for myself, but with others, that feeling of isolation. And as you say, you can be sat, in your home, which in some ways is fantastic. But, sometimes you do just want that interaction, and being able to know that there are people that you can meet up with or go and work somewhere really does make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what about, if you were looking back when you first started out, what would you say, sort of were, apart from discovering that isolation and that desire to make sure that you did have people around you when it suits you, what were the other challenges, or sort of maybe the key challenges that you would advise somebody starting out now to really try and take into account before they go too far down the road of starting their own business?
I think it's to get into a routine of work, in terms of, to begin with, I was very much focused on, I needed to be doing something on the business at all times, and I needed to be busy, and it didn't really matter what I was doing. As long as I was busy, I felt like I was doing something on the business. But then that led me to be too busy. I would just fill my time. I'd get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I'd start working straight away. I'd get to about 2 o'clock in the afternoon and I'd realise I was still sitting here in my pyjamas. I hadn't actually eaten anything or done anything, and just busily type away at whatever it was that I was doing. And then I'd finish at kind of 7, 8 o'clock at night. So I think it's being very clear on what the priorities are and what is going to make the biggest difference to your business, and kind of being very, especially in the first stages, planning well on what is going to make a difference to your business, what you really need to get done, and being honest with yourself about what you really need to get done, because a lot of the time I would tell myself that I really, really needed to do my receipts in Receipt Bank, and I needed to do them that day rather than do something that perhaps wasn't, it was that eat the frog moment and I didn't want to do it. But of course, my receipts seemed really important to me at that point. So it is being honest with yourself and identifying what it is that you really need to do that's going to move your business forward in those first few months.
Excellent. And just thinking about you personally, I know that you spend a lot of time, well, one, run a triathlon recently, and also you do quite a bit for charity. And I just wondered if you wanted to talk, because I know those two tie together quite well. If you want to talk a little bit about that and I guess how you find it, how it fits with your business life, what it gives you just generally.
Yeah. So yes, I did my first triathlon for Disability Challengers down in Guildford in 2011. It was just a very short one. And absolutely loved kind of being part of their community, being able to help. They've got an amazing facility down there helping disabled children and their families. They're just a brilliant place to go and experience. And I know that they're a lifeline for the children and their families. And so I've tried to do something kind of every year or every other year since then. And particularly as Flamme Rouge, I've got involved in their business club, which is fantastic. Meet lots of other local businesses who are just as passionate about the charity and fundraising and making a difference in their community as I am, because I've always thought that for me, being in business, it's not just about the money. If it was about the money, I'd go back and work in London, earning a lot more than I do as my business. But it's about being able to do something with what I love doing as a business and to be able to make a difference to other people. So this year I'm doing another triathlon later in the year, which is an iron distance triathlon, but over 3 days, which will be a bit easier. And for me, it's great because it also adds something to my day that I need to exercise, and actually making the time to exercise during my day gives me that kind of clarity of thought. It's quite often that you'll be sitting kind of doing work and you'll think, no, I don't have time to do any exercise. But on those days, actually, if you don't exercise, they're often the days where by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, your brain will be just completely fried. So actually making the time to take that time out and go and do some exercise really does help with me physically and mentally, but it also just really helps with my workload, and it helps me kind of get some space and come back to what I'm doing, thinking a lot clearer.
And then I think that's really important for people, is to have that time where you do just stop. And I was away recently, and I know there was a point where I was just sitting in a cafe, and theoretically I was reading. And then I realized that I wasn't reading at all. I was actually just completely in the moment, watching the world go by. I was right by a beach. There was lots of activity happening. And it was just really nice to just be there and to not feel that I had to do something. And so having something, whether it's just that piece or whether it's going out and, doing the exercise that you need to do, I think is really important to helping you to stay, healthy in all aspects of it.
Absolutely.
So how did you take up running? I love the way you say, "Oh, it's just a little one." I'm not sure that a little and triathlon really go together. But how did you get to a point of deciding that was something you were going to do? I have a friend who's has run for probably as long as I know him, but then a few years ago suddenly decided he was going to run the London Marathon. And now he seems to run marathons, and he's running his third London Marathon, I should say, this coming year. So what drove you to deciding to try, a triathlon?
For me, it was the fact that at one point I was 20 stone, and I decided that I needed to do something about it. I needed to kind of turn things around. I didn't like myself very much, and so I started doing a little bit of exercising on an exercise bike every day, and I started losing weight, and then I actually started doing a little bit of running, and was doing quite well with the running, but I actually have something called hypermobility syndrome, which actually means I really shouldn't be running very much, not as much as I was doing, and I was getting injured a lot, and I've had quite a few operations on my feet. And I happened to meet a lady who I'm still in touch with now, actually, who does triathlons. And she said to me, well, why don't you try a triathlon? Because then the running is only one small part of the rest of it. And cycling, I had to get my first proper bike, which was a road bike, which I was scared of falling off constantly. And I went back to swimming, which I used to do when I was younger anyway. But I found open water swimming, which I now absolutely love. So yeah, it was something that I knew I needed something to keep me fit. I love exercise, but unless I've got a bit of a goal, I don't tend to prioritize it over other things, which is why I always try and do kind of one race a year that is my, as they call it, a race.
Right.
Something to train for and something to get me out of bed in the morning.
That's amazing, Anne. I think I've told you that before, that I think you are very amazing. I know you say you're not, but trust me, you are.
No, I don't feel it.
It's okay. I feel it for you. So, just trying to think if there's anything else that we've talked a little bit about how you started with Flamme Rouge, how you've come with this amazing, running triathlons, running, cycling and swimming them, and the Challengers charity, which, I remember hearing them speak one day about what they do, and it is absolutely amazing the difference they make in lives. Is there anything, I guess, that you'd like to wrap up on, that if you were listening to this yourself, that you wish somebody would have, I don't know, told you this or shared this or...
I think for me, and I was talking to somebody else about this that's just set up their business, it's that it is hard setting up a business, and I don't think sometimes you realise how hard it's going to be. I used to be a business coach, actually, and I remember coaching businesses, but at that point I had no idea what it was actually like to run a business. I knew the processes behind it, the marketing, the kind of operations, and I knew how to coach people into the doing of the business, but I didn't realize the kind of psychology and the issues that people faced. And for me, when I first started up, I used to wake up in the mornings and I used to think, oh my God, how am I going to get any more clients? Oh my God, I'm never going to get any more clients. People aren't going to like me. And then I'd panic about how I was going to pay my rent. And that's just, as a business owner, your brain kind of plays tricks on you. So I learned various different coping mechanisms. I've now got a little mantra that I say to myself in my head whenever I wake up thinking like that. I've got a few client quotes, which it sounds really sad, but I keep them on a piece of paper next to my bed so that if I do wake up thinking, oh my God, my clients are all going to leave me, I look at these client quotes and I think, no, Anne, you are good at what you do. So it's reminding yourself that the voices in your head, which there will be often the doubting voices. They're just there to protect you, really. They're there to actually use them, if anything, to give you a bit of a spur to go out and to kind of plan and to get more clients, to get more business, but allow them to give you a bit of a kick, but don't allow them to kick you in the head and to kick you down. And just surround yourself with people that whenever you are feeling like that, you can call them and they can give you a virtual slap down the phone.
That's fantastic, Anne, and thank you. And I agree with the need to, have the people around and to be able to put those voices in their place. So where they belong, whether that's giving you a kick or just telling them to go away, because I think it is a big shock. Especially if you've come from a corporate background and you've always, you've been relatively successful, and now suddenly you're out there on your own and it's a whole new world.
Yeah, especially when you come across a problem in your business, because when you're in a corporate background, you're part of a team, you've got people sitting around you. I mean, I worked in an office where there were 1,000 people in the building, 100 people on each floor that was completely open plan. So if something came up, or if something happened, or if somebody said something to you, you could immediately turn to the person next to you and just say, gosh, can you believe it? Such and such has just said this. And they would say, oh, they're obviously just having a bad day. And you'd think, yeah, they're right, I'm going to move on. But when you're sitting at home on your own and somebody says something, and it might just be that you've taken it completely the wrong way, but but you sit there and it can go round in your head and it can go round in your head and you can dwell on it. So it is important to kind of make up for the lack of colleagues with just having that support network around you, that you can just send them a quick text and go, this is what's just happened. And they can go, yeah, that happens to me all the time. It's fine. Move on.
That's really great, Anne. Thank you very much. And thank you for being my very first guest.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much for listening to the first episode of Bridging Gaps, the business podcast. I'll be looking at how to improve the listening experience for you in future episodes, and I'll be back in a couple of weeks with my next interview. You've been listening to Deborah Levitt on Bridging Gaps, the business podcast.